Namaste to all of you from Dhananjaya Kumar on this video episode, Great Minds, Great Quotes. On the subject today is ignorance. We should all know by now that ignorance is something like darkness. Darkness does not exist on its own. It does not have an independent identity or existence. It is a word used, ignorance, something like darkness, which is absence of light. So darkness on its own does not exist. It is light or absence of light. More light or less light. More ignorance, therefore, or less ignorance, which is, relatively speaking, absence of light. Similarly, ignorance is not in its own existence, that this is ignorance. It is called, named by this word, ignorance, because there is absence of knowledge or less knowledge, less understanding or misunderstanding. All these are part of what we call ignorance, which is absence of knowledge. So the first quotation is from an unknown wise man. If ignorance is bliss, why are there not more happy people? So this is humorous but a serious comment, that if ignorance is bliss, why aren't more people in bliss or happy? So the gesture here is that happiness or bliss accompanying ignorance may be temporary, short-lived, until the person learns something and then part of his ignorance is gone. He doesn't identify that as ignorance is gone. He identified as knowledge is gained or learned. So, it's a quotable quote. If ignorance is bliss, why aren't there more happy people? Derek Bach says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. So ignorance is free. You don't have to go and search for ignorance. Just you haven't learned something and you call it a bliss or call it expensive to be educated or expensive to be knowledgeable. As we all know, these days schools and colleges are becoming expensive and many people cannot afford it. But those who afford it and send their kids to schools, colleges, they complain, they say that education is expensive. But imagine without that education, which is expensive or less expensive, just what will happen? Try ignorance. That's even more expensive, not in monetary terms, but in the loss of your time. Perhaps lifetime is lost in ignorance, and the value of education is more than the monetary value. It is not that you are cashing in with education or that the money you have spent on education is a waste. That is not the case. Education costs more or less in various places, various levels of education, but it is worth and probably more than worth every penny you spend on education of children. Because without education, life is worthless. Next one is from the Upanishads. Into blind darkness pass they who worship ignorance. In other words, those who worship ignorance or don't know that they are ignorant and live like that happily, they don't know that darkness is a blind darkness. They who worship ignorance. Into still darker darkness, they who are content with intellectual knowledge. So here is distinction between intellectual and super intellectual or spiritual knowledge. That those who are satisfied with ignorance, they are in darkness. Those who are satisfied with knowledge. Knowledge means here data and analysis and conclusions and interpretations, all those, that's knowledge you are developing, generating or gathering. And if you're satisfied with that without the thirst for further, deeper and higher knowledge, spiritual knowledge, that also is a kind of darkness. So this was the gradation of various levels of knowledge and various levels of darkness. Lao Tzu, Zen master, has said, knowing ignorance is strength. Ignoring knowledge is sickness. In other words, if you recognize the absence of knowledge, that is a strength you have. Which means, after recognize the absence of knowledge, you would naturally begin to seek knowledge, welcome knowledge, imbibe knowledge in you, learn from it and grow. That's a good sign. Knowing ignorance is strength. Ignoring knowledge is sickness. Now, even if you have gathered knowledge, understood it, and grown along with growing level of knowledge, and you ignore it. Ignore means you do not apply. The wisdom that you can derive from knowledge has not entered you. So, ignoring your knowledge, not processing it, understanding it, applying it in your life, and rising further on this step ladder of knowledge, that is sickness. Henry Adams has said, nothing in education is so astonishing as the amount of ignorance it accumulates in the form of inert facts. Now, inert facts is what he is emphasizing. Just getting numbers and data is not knowledge. It has to be organized, utilized, and grown upon. Grow yourself with knowledge by imbibing knowledge in you. So if that is not happening, simply collecting facts, inert facts, lots of data you are flooded with, you are sinking in data, and you think you are knowledgeable. That is not the case. Nothing in education is so astonishing as the amount of ignorance it accumulates in the form of inert facts. This is Don Marquis' quote. Ours is a world where people don't know what they want and are willing to go through hell to get it. So first of all, it refers to the choices we make. We don't know what we want, or we want something that we don't need, or we want something that may actually harm us. And to get that, which is of no value to us, we go through hell to get it. So this is misallocation of resources. It is misdirection of your intention and your search for knowledge which is or which does not reflect your goal, your intention, your progress. So simply getting to collect knowledge, one Ours is a world where people don't know what they want, misguided, and are willing to go through hell to get what? They don't know what. So it's kind of roundabout way of expressing the futility of useless pursuits. This one is by Daniel Boorstin. Daniel Boorstin. The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance. The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. Now, this illusion of knowledge is a very slippery and mysterious stage of mind, that it assumes, your mind convinces you that now you know everything. It has misled you. So this notion that you know everything, and this notion that what you know is correct and it is of great value. So this misplaced importance to knowledge, which is actually illusion, it is not true knowledge, that is the greatest obstacle to discovery. Greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. So a lot of times we convince ourselves that we know everything and what we know is right knowledge. That illusion of knowledge is dangerous. The final quote is by Gautam Buddha. He explains the whole story of knowledge in very simple words. The world never begins, but it ends. Enlightenment begins, but it never ends. Ignorance has no beginning, but it has an end. And awareness has only a beginning, but no end. So if you take it phrase by phrase, the world never begins, but it ends. This is kind of traditional spiritual knowledge coming from ancient scriptures, that there is no beginning of universe, of existence. It has always existed. But it ends. What ends? The material expression, the material manifestation of existence ends. In other words, existence is cyclical. The process never begins and ends, but episodes of existence, of certain types of existence or life forms, begin and end. So this cyclicality is conveyed in the first part. The second part is enlightenment begins, but it never ends. So if you are enlightened, let's assume that you are enlightened, then you will not be unenlightened ever. You are enlightened and you remain enlightened. It doesn't end. The third part is ignorance has no beginning, but it has an end. In other words, the ignorance is not something that you are living a life and suddenly ignorance begins in you. If ignorance is there, which is essentially absence of knowledge, if absence of knowledge is there and knowledge begins to come, then gradually it will end ignorance. And finally, awareness has only a beginning but no end. Awareness of the reality, awareness of your true self. When it begins, it doesn't end until total awareness is gained. Thank you for listening to this episode on ignorance, and look forward to meeting you again soon.